USC versus Nebraska. Joe, a playoff eliminator here for both of these, potentially, with the Trojans going up against the Cornhuskers. When you preview the Trojans versus the Cornhuskers, how do you see it playing out?
USC is a 6.5-point favorite against Nebraska. Blake, I think that USC is going to boat race Nebraska.
Woo!
I do not think that this Nebraska team has been very good over the past couple of weeks. I think that they have been incredibly overrated this year. I got a little bit duped into buying into them. They've got one guy. Dylan Raiola is as gifted as everyone has hyped him up to be. And I think that he has taken a lot of unnecessary criticism during their recent rough stretch. The dude's throwing passes lefty and then diving also to complete passes. He's doing some of the most unreal things that you'll ever see a quarterback do. His offensive line is terrible. They've allowed 26 sacks, and their defense is atrocious at stopping the run. They're 105th in defensive EPA per rush. Like this USC offense, it scores points in bunches. It has had a couple of inconsistent spots, but I think with a 7:30 kick at Nebraska, assuming the weather's fine, unlike the Notre Dame game, that they're going to have the same level of offensive explosiveness, and Nebraska will not be able to keep up.
I got to say this about Raiola.
Okay.
He takes god-awful sacks, though. Like, I'm talking about god-awful. Like, he tries to be a little bit too Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes as a quarterback, you just got to get down. Eat the play. And he tries to, do the whole – Joe, you ever gone to a car lot and you see the big balloon thing out front? It's like wallowing around everywhere. That's Dylan Raiola sometimes, I feel like. He's the guy – he's like the little thing outside of a car lot that's doing all the crazy stuff. Get down. I'm with you. Their offensive line has not been good. But here's the problem that I have with Nebraska when you say that. I don't think that they're running the ball enough. Meaning, I think that Dana Holgorsen, for everything that it's worth, they're trying to throw the ball and make everything about him when they shouldn't. I get that you're 101st in the country in rushing, but there's got to be times where you're staying with it. Like, I'll give an example. There were multiple times in that Michigan game that, Joe, they got to stay with it. They got to stay with this and take some of this pressure off of him. But I do look at this and say, I look at Nebraska and ask myself the question, are they a little bit fraudulent? They very may not well be. But every time that I've seen you go up against opponents, like we'll talk about Cincinnati in a little bit. Well, we've talked about and recapped that Michigan game. I feel like every time that you've been in the big spot and then you go into a game versus Minnesota, you're unable to perform. You're unable to do what needs to be done. Joe, Minnesota was going I formation, toss dive at their ass, and they couldn't stop it. There was nothing glamorous about what Minnesota and PJ Fleck did. They just got in their boat and they rode it. Puns intended. They have been out-physicaled in multiple games this year when it mattered the most. Offensively, I do think that they have some weapons outside, and Raiola has done a lot of really good things. I'm with you there. I do think he takes a lot of bag sacks. But, man, I got to give USC a lot of credit. One thing that they've done is been able to create a lot of havoc. They've been able to get after the quarterback, and it's something that they've done well. However, this secondary isn't great. And this team wants to throw the football around all over the place. And I wonder, a struggling secondary, is Nebraska going to be able to take hold of a secondary that we've seen blow a lot of coverages and not be able to man up? When I look at USC and I say, hey, you're 80th in the country in passing yards allowed, you've been giving up a lot of yards, this is a team that's going to throw the ball 40 times on your ass. Are you going to be able to contain it every single play? It's going to be my big question here.
I understand the concern because we've talked about in the past how USC's corner room.
Oh, that secondary is so bad.
Well, I wouldn't call it so bad. Because they've had performances where their secondary has played solidly. They're actually 36th in EPA per pass allowed. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the yards that they've allowed and the success that they're giving up to opposing teams when they're throwing it against them, but their corner room's not great. I'm not particularly scared by the Nebraska receiving room going up against this USC defense. The biggest, most important thing, and this is very Lincoln Riley-esque, is that USC tops as many important categories in terms of offensive production as possible.
They do.
They are so explosive, and it all starts with Jayden Maiava and with Mekhi Lemon. And Jacoby Lane has also been a phenomenal second option in that offense. I kind of wonder what's happening with this run game, because it feels like after they lose Wayman Jordan, there's a little bit of a inconsistency with establishing the run. But at the end of the day, Blake, even if that is an issue for them, they can put up points in such an explosive manner. And I think that when we watched the Michigan game, that to me was an example of how this game could unfold, where Michigan does some things well. It has a lot of really nice offensive pieces, and they were able to get some big plays with Marsh and with Bryce Underwood. But they couldn't do it quick enough to keep up with USC. Plain and simple, when USC's passing attack is this explosive and has this easy of a time of creating big plays time and time again, Nebraska is not going to be able to keep up with it. When you have that much of a separation, it is what leads to a team winning confidently in a spot like this.
Yeah, and something that's interesting to talk about in this matchup between Maiava and that absolutely explosive wide receiver room, I don't know what to make of Nebraska's secondary. Because when I look at the teams that you've played, like, let me give an example. They're second in the country in pass defense.
That's inflated. That's inflated.
It is massively.
Seriously, let's look at who they've played. They have not played anybody who has good receiver room.
Okay, well, thank you for taking my take. But basically, yes. Teams that don't throw the ball well at all. Minnesota, Michigan, Cincinnati, I guess, was the best to some extent. But I even look at Cincinnati, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Joe, they're the best all-passing offense that they've seen, and they're 58th. Like, it's not like that they've been lighting the world on fire through the air. I do feel like it's inflated. And I don't think that this secondary is going to be able to hold up the entire time here. And we'll go from there and see what happens. Now, people will say, well, Blake, why did you lead this in as a playoff eliminator? Nebraska's got 3 losses. You must have forgot about strength of schedule, 9-3 teams. Like, any kind of chaos can happen here. Look at what the ACC is going through at the current moment. This is it. This is the last shot that you have. I just think that this wide receiver room for USC is just too much for them. They're going to continue to pour on. Mekhi Lemon, Lane. Dude, I'm going to keep talking about this. I'm going to keep saying this to you until I'm blue in the face, until you put him higher on your draft board. This McCree kid at tight end can play. He can block really well. He's really good in pass reception. I know he had a critical fumble a couple of weeks ago. He is really good. They have a lot of weapons. My question is, how does Maiava respond after having some bad decisions that went against him against Notre Dame? And I think he's going to be able to respond. Joe, by the way, this rushing attack for USC, they're top 25 in the country too. Going up against a unit, as you brought up earlier, that's really bad stopping the run. They're 89th in the country in run defense. I think that I don't know if Nebraska is going to be able to slow him down here.
I didn't realize McCree was as old as he was, by the way. He's 23 years old. I didn't realize that. I do like him as well, dude. I think he's very underrated, and he's somebody that I'm going to get eyes on.
The blocking on the end line of scrimmage. Listen, when you talk about run game, especially the way that they want to run the counter a lot, dude, he's lighting human beings up. He is getting serious. I'm not saying a tight end is the big thing for their run game, but when you have a tight end that can take on a defensive end when you're running a counter, he's getting push. And that's the part for me that I'm like, dude, I think USC from an offense perspective has a different mentality in running the football. They are really good at receiver. They do a lot of the small things right now very well that I don't know if Nebraska can handle.
No, and this is all what I keep coming down to is I think that this USC team is a lot better than people give it credit for. They have a bad performance against Illinois with a really difficult spot to have to play at the time slot that they had to play at. And the Notre Dame game was just not a game that they were built to win. It was raining. It was just an awful weather situation that you're not used to. And also you were going up against a team that's much better than yours. I think we saw that Notre Dame team was more equipped to win that game than they were. But there still is, damn it. I thought I went the whole show without coughing. This is, as you said, a legitimate shot, though, to set up a path to the playoff for USC. I think Nebraska's out of it. I think that they're completely out of the mix.
They very well may be.
But after this game, once USC wins, I'm that confident that USC wins this game. They have Northwestern, they have Iowa. Both those games are at home. Then they get UCLA to end the season. The one game that is going to be really tricky for them and is going to be the decider is the game against Oregon. And if you lose that Oregon game close, you will be in the mix, but probably won't get in. But man, could you imagine if they beat Oregon? If they managed to pull that thing off and if they beat Oregon, what that would do to the Big Ten standings? We would have a shitload of 10-2 Big Ten teams.
Well, I have a question. What would be Oregon's biggest win?
By then they would realistically have had a win against Washington. I know.
Yeah.
So Oregon might get knocked out in that world. Seriously.
I mean, we'll see. I'm not picking against Dan Lanning. Maybe Dan Lanning.
I think Oregon's going to win that game. But
what if Dan Lanning's focusing on LSU? You know, like you just never know. I mean, you never really know. I'm clearly joking there. I do think that they roll here. I do think that when you talk about look, here's the truth. I can't believe after what we went through last year that we're going to come in here and say this. Here's just the truth. They're going to get out physicaled by USC. That's the part where I think, look, people want to talk about Lincoln, make fun of them. They are physically running the ball at an alarming rate. And I don't think people really kind of saw that part of their game being brought up. And this Nebraska team just is not good in stopping the run.
And also, just to add to that, their defensive line has been incredibly physical too. The performance that they had against Notre Dame was not indicative of what they are as a team. They have some really good defensive line talent. And to that point, that is one of the most stark, shocking things about Nebraska. You would expect them to be physically tough and imposing. They're none of that. They don't have any of that. They're not showing any of that stuff in any of these games, which has been shocking. Out physicaled on their offensive line. They're getting run all over on defense. That is, I think, the biggest separator with this that nobody's talking about. USC is the more physical team in this matchup.
USC is going to be the more physical team. And look, Nebraska, what's going to happen? I don't know. We'll see. All right, Joe, let's move on here.